My greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today I am proud to bring you Living Theurgy, part of the Voice of Olympus series. And I have with me tonight Brandy Williams, Apollonius, and Tony Mierzwicki, and we are going to be talking about ensouled objects. And Brandy and Apollonius did a lot of the research that tonight is based on. So I will pass the scepter to them and they can speak on it to give us the background. And then I guess we'll all share our own experiences and our own thoughts. Brandy, would you care to share the article or description of the article?
Sure. I saw an article about a sphere called the Sphere of Helios, which is in Athens, and it's been in the museum for a while, but Nick Farrell recently got interested in it and said he believed that there was a spirit ensouled in the object. And so I popped a note to the group, and Apollonius, it appears, has seen it recently in Athens and took pictures, which were great pictures. So has a lot more information about it. So I'd love, Apollonius, for you to talk to us about looking at the object and then what you saw and what you felt.
Sure. So yeah, I was in Athens in early June, and this sphere is in the Acropolis Museum, which is it's a relatively new museum. It was built just after the Olympic Games were held in Athens, and it's really a beautiful museum.
Six not connected.
Fabulous connection, and it's just sitting there. It's probably about so big, I would say. It says 30 centimeters, I believe, is the measurement I've seen. Marble sphere. It's got engravings all around it. There's most prominently there's an engraving that appears to be Helios. It's a being with rays, 7 rays coming out of his head, sitting on a crown with under a sort of an arch, which could be the arch of the sky, and has 2 dogs by him. One also has rays, and which you might wonder, well, what does that have to do with the sun? Well, they're the dog stars, is the interpretation. And then there's some other symbols around the thing too. It's on all of its sides. It's engraved with various symbols. There's a coiled serpent, a bearded serpent with a crown, and there's 5 intersecting circles. There's a triangle. There's a lot of strange words, Greek letters, I should say. Most of them are not actual Greek words, but they're barbarian, quote unquote, barbarian words or barbarian names like we find in the Greek magical papyri. Although they, as near as I can tell, I haven't really done an extensive test, but other people that have investigated this thing have not cited that these names actually do appear in the papyri. So they're the same kind. So, so here it is. It's sitting there. It was dug up near the sanctuary of Dionysus, near the Acropolis, which I also visited while I was there. And I can say a little about that later. But so there's this sphere, and what is it used for? I mean, it's clearly magical, and they call it a magical sphere because it's clearly magical, but it's not obvious what its purpose is. Often magical objects will have the purpose written on them somewhere. Give me victory, or bring the woman to me, or break up the relationship between these people. Some sort of actual statement of purpose is part of the actual construction of the object. And if it's not expressed on this object what its purpose might have been in any sort of clear way, there's really almost no intelligible words on it. There's maybe one word that it looks like ether, or in other words, but even it's misspelled, so you could say there's really no legitimate Greek words on it anywhere, as far as I know. So it's a very mysterious object. It was, if I remember right, it was dug up in 1908, and there was a big paper published on it in 1913. And as far as I know, that's really the last extensive study of the thing. So, Brandy had asked because I saw the thing and I was able to, it's just sitting out there and you could wander all around it and look at it very closely. I took some pictures of it. And Brandy had asked whether I felt like there was still a spirit dwelling in it. And, I have to say, I didn't really feel that. I mean, sometimes when there's an object like that has been empowered in some way, it just really grabs you and it sort of exudes its energy. And I did not particularly sense that with this object. But again, you have to figure this thing was dug up over a century ago, and it's been sitting in a museum where thousands of people, probably every day. I don't know what the attendance on the Acropolis Museum is, but I'm sure it's thousands every day. Wander around past this thing and look at it and so forth. So, it's been my experience in visiting sacred sites and looking at various sorts of artifacts that often the ones that are most popular literally get profaned. I think there's just so many people there viewing it, walking on it, walking through it, whatever it may be, that have no spiritual attachment to it, that it just kind of dissipates the energy. And so it's quite possible that that's what happened with this sphere. Another theory is that because it was buried, is that when this sphere had served its purpose, or perhaps when its owner died, it was ritually deconsecrated and then given a burial, so to speak, a decent burial, which would be the sort of thing you might do with a magical object like this. Like I said, it's a marble sphere. It's quite large. It would be difficult to destroy it. I mean, you could break the thing up, but it would actually take a bit of work to do that. So it's not like some talismans and things like that you could burn them or disassemble them in some more easy way. So it may have been that this thing had whatever its magical potency was removed in ancient times before it was buried, or it could just be, in my opinion, that it's just kind of evaporated over the centuries, and especially over the last century, of just being kind of an object of curiosity sitting in a museum. So anyway, it is anyway a remarkable object because as Farrell points out, I mean, this was not cheap to make. It's a very smooth, perfectly round ball of marble with all of these engravings on it. This was not something that somebody just did in an afternoon to, some quick spell or something like that. This was something that was crafted for an important and enduring purpose, whatever it might have been.
Well, thank you. That was very comprehensive. Brandy, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, so one of the things that interested me, aside from the fact that it's an amazing object, right? Also, it interested me that Nick Farrell thought it might have housed a spirit, and I was wondering why. I don't think that I've seen another instance where a sphere would have a spirit in it like that. Statues will have deities or spirits in them, right? So it's statues that are more like human looking rather than a ball. So the idea of a spirit house, that was a new one to me, and I wondered if any of us had heard of that in the ancient world in this context.
Well, in the Argonaut expedition, you had the prow of the ship. You had Athena guiding the ship through the prow. I'm trying to think of other incidents. I'm sure there are others, but in my experience, it has been mostly statues or representations that house the spirits. And I actually had experience doing that once, and I could share that if you'd like. My experience has been that some of them do evaporate over time, or they're not aware or awake in time, and some of them remain very active. When I was a teenager, I was working on a book. That's a story for another day. But anyway, Prentice Hall was interested in my book. So my editor, Prentice Hall, asked me if I'd ever been like off a highway somewhere in the woods. And I told him I can't say I have. So I said, if I go there, just tell him what I experienced. So I went there, and yeah, I just walked around. It was woods. I used to go camping a lot. And at one point I got very confused. Like I got very disoriented. I got very confused. I didn't know which way the highway was. You know, it was just very strange. And as I got away from there, the confusion would lift and I was able to orient myself. But every time I got closer to there, the confusion was, immense. So back then I was a deep trance medium for a neo-theosophical group. And so I put myself in an altered state and contacted my guides and asked what this was. So they showed me, and again, it contradicted what I knew of history then and also now, but this is what they showed me. They showed me a bunch of Phoenicians putting some writings in the form of scrolls and tubes underneath a huge rock. And then I thought, and the rock was, where the confusion was the greatest. It was a pretty big rock. And then I saw another vision of bulldozers bulldozing that whole area of forest, and then whatever was guarding those scrolls would be set free at that time. And that actually happened like 5 years later. I heard that whole area was bulldozed. If the Phoenicians or ancient Semitic people actually did put that there, then that had been active and very active for a long time. When I discussed what I experienced with my publisher, he said that's what everybody experienced. So it was consistent, the disorientation, the confusion, and it seemed to center around like a boulder that was just like there. So some of them can be there for a long time. I know with family statues too, depending on how much attention somebody gave to the statue, sometimes there's a sense of presence coming from the statue, and at other times it's just the statue. It doesn't seem to matter where you put the statue or how attentive you are to the statue. There's like nothing there.
I think that's part of the intention too. If you want to, you can create something that in a sense is supposed to stay potent over a long period of time without someone attending to it. And that would be part of the intention you would put into it. And it sounds like that was the case with this stone. But that's a different way of doing things.
I was interested in Tony's input too, because my memory of the Greek magical papyri is that all of the ensouling of objects is about putting some sort of energy into a statue rather than like a globe or a house, a spirit house. And I thought it was mostly deities and not necessarily spirits. But Tony, I think you really know the magical papyri. Do you know of an object like the sphere of Helios?
No, I've never come across this before. Like you said, the PGM tend to deal with ensouling statues. So the statue tends to be made out of a material that's in keeping with the nature of the god. So for instance, if we're fashioning a statue for Hermes, then you're going to, if you're using wood, you'd preferentially carve it out of ebony. If you're working with Apollo, you'd be working with laurel wood. If you're working with wax, it'd be a wax that's dyed orange, because orange is the color associated with Hermes. Quite often there might be a hollow base in the statue, and you can put in words of power or the intention. The important things about this is both Apollonius and Nick Farrell have pointed out that there is no actual purpose spelt out in this particular sphere. Whereas normally, when you look at statues, when you look at the curse tablets, they will have the purpose for which they're made clearly outlined. So my gut feeling is that it's supposed to be a receptacle for solar energy. Nick Farrell pointed out that even though the entity looks like Helios, you're looking at a man with a crown with 7 points sticking out of the 7 solar rays. He's not in a chariot. He's basically just standing there. And Nick Farrell pointed out that there was a painting from Pompeii of an entity called Helios Apollo. So it is quite possible that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a Hellenistic composite of Helios and Apollo. And as Apollonius just pointed out, carving something out of marble means that they wanted it to last forever. So it almost seems to me that someone wanted to have a permanent receptacle for solar energy.
Oh.
I mean, that's just my gut feeling, although Nick does come up with this very interesting idea that there's a name of a daemon at the very top of the sphere, and he thinks that the sphere could have been a receptacle for that daemon, much as that sort of thing in Islamic magical practices.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to me as an object that would hold solar energy. That's a really good point, Tony, and I thank you. I was really curious about your input.
I mean, that's just my thought on the matter. I haven't studied it as extensively as Nick Farrell has. He actually gives a link to a fascinating study. It's in French, and my French is just a little bit rusty, but it still has reproductions of all the artwork on the sphere and all the inscriptions. So I think there's enough there to keep someone working for months and months to unravel its mysteries.
And thank you, Apollonius, for sharing that article with us.
Yeah. And your pictures. Is it something that any of us are inspired to do? I mean, this is a magnificent thing, an amazing thing. I would you were talking about the statues with holes in them that you can put stuff in. I really want someone to make those.
Oh, I've made them.
Have you?
I've made, yeah, I can. I've in fact, it's out of the Greek magical papyri. It's a little statue I made out of polymer resin, and if I remember right, and had a little hole in the back. You can put a materia in there, and or a scroll and stuff like that. So yeah, you could. As you know, they don't have to be artistically
Right. exquisite,
to do the job, and so you can do that. But I would like to say a word about that is a very typical thing to do, and that's something I've done is you make the deity, a form of the deity, or an animal like the baboon or something for Hermes, and you have a receptacle under it or in its back or something like that. But that's not the only way to do it. You can have a picture, a two-dimensional picture with space behind for including some of the symbol, the material you use to connect with the deity. And I think in this case, if you look at this sphere, of course, it's covered with all of these symbols, and those are the things that are connecting to this deity. We don't understand all of the symbols, I think, but I know we don't understand them. Well, we understand some of them maybe, but that's what instead of putting them in a box, and instead of using some materials, they're engraved into the sphere. Now, the sphere shape itself is probably significant. The fact that it is not a humanoid sort of shape probably means that the sphere represents the heavens in some sense, or the sun, perhaps. But the cosmos in some way, and that's probably the spherical shape itself is probably one of the symbolic aspects of it. And the other thing to mention is, as both the 1913 article and Nick Farrell both mentioned, there's nothing on it to hang it up, for example. There's no, sort of bolt holes or anything like that that would indicate the way this might have been mounted on something. So all we can presume is that it was maybe standing on a tripod or something like that. And again, if it was on a tripod, for example, that you would then have space underneath where you could put, say solar herbs and solar gems and things like that too, to empower it. So it may not be the whole mechanism, so to speak. It may be just the top part of it. But it is very interesting that it's just this sphere, it does sort of have a top and a bottom just because of the orientation of the figures. But other than that, there's sort of no visible way of attaching it to anything else. And so you kind of have to wonder, what was the context of its use? I don't want to say display because it's probably not an art object. It's probably a tool, a magical tool. And so what was the context of its use? How would this thing be used? It's not, you can't obviously do much with it except have it sit there, fumigate it, things like that. But you're not going to wear it, for example. It pretty much has to sit there. And so in that sense, being a repository for a spirit of some sort is, the most likely use, I think, for the thing. It just kind of cries out that that's what it was used for. It was, in somebody's sanctuary, and was used for contacting this spirit and probably getting the spirit to do things, but not one specific thing, because again, you wouldn't put all of that effort typically into a spirit to do one very specific job. So this is more like what we would think of as like a familiar, an assistant that's going to help you on a variety of things with a long-standing relationship to the magician. That would be my impression of what this thing is used for.
I'm going to grab an object really fast. I didn't want to interrupt you. Actually, grab a couple of objects because they're sort of pertain to what we're talking about. So, for example, I have all the Olympians. So I have the whole set of these, and this is Hermes. So if I were to ensoul this object, I could invoke Hermes into it, and then I would be working with that energy. And there would be a commitment to that, and I would be doing that like on a daily basis, which is why I've chosen not to do it, because I have done that with a statue, which I then decommissioned because it's a lot. It's just a lot, right? But I use this, I use this as a temporary house for Hermes. So I might invoke Hermes and then again say, thank you so much, and release that again. And this is it's a technology, magical technology that I've ported over from the Hindu tantric tradition, where that's really that's what we do all the time. We take a statue, and it's Navaratri. It's the festival, the deity's festival. You say, hey deity, here's your house, and then that for that period of time, then you feed the deity, and then the deity goes away again. So you have a coming and going, like Dionysus actually used to do, right? So there's that as an object, and then there's the idea of the sphere, right? So I've got a citron ball, and citron has some connection with Mercury. So this has the virtue of Mercury, and it's got a little thing that it sits on. So now this sits on my desk, and now I have this energy that I can, it has the virtue of Mercury, so I can pull the energy of Mercury. And that's a different class of, like, I think, magical working than putting a spirit into something. And the sphere of Helios doesn't fall into either one of those. This is why it was really interesting to me, right? It's like, it's a sphere, so it has its own virtue. It has the virtue of marble. It has the virtue of whatever the words are. and whatever the symbols are. So those have been brought to it. This doesn't have anything on it. It's just got the energy of the stone itself. But then it seems to want to be a house for spirit too. So that's why it was a very, very interesting object. And an interesting point that you made, Apollonius, about the assistant. Perhaps it is in the class, there's another class of beings, not deities or spirits, but the paredros, the helper that you have, that's a one-on-one relationship. Maybe that's what that object is pertaining to.
Yeah, I think that's very likely. Yeah.
I think if we go outside of magical practice to the paranormal, objects get possessed. That's part of our popular culture now. It's been on TV shows and in movies, and there were even series devoted to gathering up these possessed objects. So in that sphere, things can stray into objects or remain with objects that they weren't put into intentionally. They can get attached to objects. And we've had a succession of cars, and the car elemental has been the same. And my wife even gave it a name, and because it's the same energy. And other electronic devices over the years, some of them have a personality definitely, beyond their function. One of the things that I was thinking about is all of you described this from different perspectives, is that could it be like a mnemonic of some sort? Like, for instance, I know when I'm working on something, I surround myself with certain objects, and eventually I'll find the proper sequence where it'll anchor my thoughts. So nothing's actually going on inside the object, it's going on inside my head, but the objects trigger certain thoughts or realizations so that I have the entire question I'm pondering or wrestling with. And some of the objects might be strange, and they might only have meaning to me in the context of what I'm using them for. Could it be something like that? Like, could this represent a theology or perspective that is not entirely old to the person using it? It might incorporate new concepts. And the reason I had these thoughts is because, like, for instance, the Persians used the Olympian deities and kind of matched them with their deities, and Mithraism does this, and other writings we have from the ancient Near East, where it's not our Zeus, but it's a Zeus, it's their Zeus. And Nonnus mentions like all the different Zeuses and Herculeses and Cronuses and how they correspond, to one another. And that one man's Hercules is another man's Zeus, depending on where you happen to be. So maybe it's something like that. Maybe they're adopting a new worldview, and that's why it's a globe, and they want to work within that magical arena or magical sphere, and that will contain the symbols and sounds that they need to do whatever it is they're trying to accomplish. That has no basis in any scholarly reality. It's just my gut feeling.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think, that one of the things that you find out in theurgy, and in fact, ancient theurgists, Proclus, for example, point this out, is once you're in contact with a deity, they establish their own means of connection with you, their own symbols. They give you,
Yes.
If you want to invoke me, use this sign or use this word. And it may not be anything traditional at all. In fact, it's probably not anything traditional. So, I mean, you may start with the traditional stuff because that's what you've got. But then as a matter of practice, you deviate off from that. So this sphere could be a result of decades of some magician working with a deity or a spirit of some sort. These words and symbols could all be things that were given to that magician or discovered by that magician that wouldn't apply to anybody else particularly. So in that sense, it's like what you were saying, Hercules, that it's something to tune that magician's mind to that spirit. And that depends both on the magician's mind and it depends on the nature of that spirit. So you have to have sort of a resonance between the two, and that can be very personal. There's sort of general or generic way of establishing that resonance, but then to tune it up, so to speak, to make it more exact, it has to, in some sense, be compatible with both ends of the communication. I like to explain a lot of this stuff in terms of tuning a radio,
Mhm.
and so what you're doing with all of the various things that you do in constructing a theurgical object, and again, that's words, sounds, thoughts, images, stones, incense, plants, what have you, all of this stuff, material and immaterial, that's all a way of tuning it. And the more you put in, the more precisely you can tune it. So like the citrine that Brandy showed us, well, that's one substance which has a certain resonance, but it's kind of vague, so it's kind of like a radio sort of broad frequency, it may kind of get everything, but not tune in at one station very, very precisely. But then you can combine that with other things. You could engrave something on the stone, or you can combine it in an object with other materials, and or with, a ritual like a prayer, and in that way tune it more precisely. And so I think that this is the way to think about these things is, and again, Proclus says this too, that, single materials tend to be too generic, and so in that sense, they just kind of vaguely draw in a particular energy. But if you want to contact a particular deity, that's where you need to be much more precise in terms of these things. And, one of the points I make is often we don't have these traditions
Mhm.
securely passed down to us. So we have to rediscover them, just like early theurgists had to as well. It's a progressive process of getting in contact with the deity and working with them, and finding a more precise way of doing it. And like Brandy said, with the statues, that are essentially ensouled only for periods of time, to my mind, again, that's like the radio. You turn it to this station when you want to listen to one thing, and
Mhm.
well, you might turn the shortwave radio to a station if you want to listen to this, and you turn your FM radio to a station if you want to listen to that, and when you're not listening, you turn it off, and it's there. It's still the right kind of radio. It can be turned on, it can be tuned, but it's not sort of always bringing in that signal because you don't need it to. And so, I would say, if you've got a statue that you're sort of maintaining long term, well, that's because you want this regular long term relationship with that being. If it's something for a particular purpose, or you only deal with, off and on, or for particular circumstances, well, then you call the deity into that statue. The statue, say, is permanent. It's going to be there. It's sitting on a shelf or something. But the ritual you do to call a deity into it at a particular time, that's so you can, whether it's celebrate a particular holy day for that deity, or do some sort of work with that deity or whatever. And then at the end of that, you thank the deity, put out the incense, dispose of the stuff that's perishable, and put the statue back on the shelf, or cover it over with a, silk or whatever. You treat it respectfully, but you've sort of turned the radio off until the next time you need it. That's the way I think about these sort of ensouled objects in any case.
Makes a lot of sense. And if you want to, and using your analogy, and if you want to talk to somebody specifically, you get their telephone number, and if they've given it to you, and there you go, you got direct line, and you can interact with that person rather than whoever happens to be on the airwaves that you could tune into.
Yeah, and I've used that analogy for dialing in a specific aspect of deity. So you have these great deities that are like Isis or Aphrodite, and they're these huge deities that have lots of aspects.
Mhm.
And then you can go to Aphrodite, the one who turns people into stone if she looks at them. That's a very specific one. So you can grab that Aphrodite through her epithet, right? So I think that's great. And I wanted to say too, Apollonius, that we're talking about this, and I'm not sure any of us are writing about this in the anthology that we're working on, but I don't know that anybody, I wonder if any of us have written this specific thing down that you said, that when you establish the relationship with the deity or spirit, that they may give you stuff that's specific to you. That may not be like general, but it's also a sign of success in the work that you've established this relationship. Now you can say, you know, I'm talking to Hermes Thursday night, you know, that he's given me this way to connect with him specifically. And I also think that that's a good way to kind of explain what we've talked about in terms of unverified personal gnosis. There is a personal gnosis, and it doesn't have to be shared with somebody else. It is, but it has a use. It has a function.
Yes.
And I think it's important to start sort of fleshing this stuff out to talk to other people about as we all start sort of experimenting with these ideas and bringing them back online, as it were. So I think it's really cool. I think somebody should write about objects for sure.
Just further to what Brandy was saying, one of the problems with channeled writings is that quite often the channel material is specific to yourself.
Right.
So back in the 70s, you had all these people coming out with thousands and thousands of pages of channeled writings, which weren't really relevant to anyone else. They're only relevant to themselves. Further to what Apollonius was saying, he pointed out that once you start developing a relationship with the god, then they may, or an entity, then they will come up with a particular specific way for you to contact them. There are actually numerous accounts of medieval magicians working with the name and the sigil of a particular spirit, and then they compel that spirit to give them their real name. Once they have that real name, they can then bring it to themselves. One question that's been going through my mind is, a few minutes ago, both you, Brandy, and Apollonius were talking about the paredros, that possibly the Helios sphere could be a receptacle for a paredros. I've actually always thought of the paredros as being analogous to the HGA. If you look at the various powers that you can have once you have access to your paredros, they're very similar to the sorts of powers that you can have once you have full access to your HGA. Say if you look through a source text like the Book of Abramelin. So does anyone else feel the same way, that there's a connection between the paredros and the HGA? I can see you nodding, so I think you kind of agree with me. So what do you think?
Yeah, I do. And I've worked the system, you know, I come from the lodge system, so I've done the whole invoking the HGA in the ceremonial context, which is very personal. This is a one-on-one relationship, and the invocation is part of the making the contact is making the right invocation. So you shape yourself into the receptacle that can make that connection, if that makes sense. So yeah, and when I started reading about the paredros, I said that really sounds really similar, and it would also be very interesting to sort of outline that that invocation using that metaphor rather than HGA, which kind of comes out of the Christian monotheistic traditions, right? So I'd love to see someone like write about that too. That's good. And Tony, have you done a working with the paredros, or have you done an invocation?
I've worked with the HGA. I think we all have, you know, through Abramelin. I've also touched on the paredros sort of more as an academic thing rather than actually practically working with them. But I kept thinking that the paredros was very similar, if not identical. It's something I should really explore a little bit more, which is, it's something that's been in the back of my mind for a while now. And actually, that's why I wanted to run it past the group, just to see what everyone else's thoughts were.
I have a paper around here somewhere. One of the young women researchers has gone real deeply into the paredros and where it appears in the PGM. So I'll dig it up and send it out to us. I
would love to read that.
Yeah. And that would make the sphere of Helios also a different kind of object. And in the ceremonial systems, we don't have an object which attaches to the HGA. You're the object that attaches to the HGA. So it would be very, very interesting to externalize that and have that out here. it's more, it's thought of more as a psychological kind of thing. Certainly in contemporary magic, which went down a psychological direction, that's kind of how we think about it. But putting it back out here and making it a solid magic, that would be really interesting.
And that's basically what Apollonius was saying. He was saying that the sphere could be a result of decades of someone working with their Panelists or HGA, and then actually crystallizing it, giving it a physical appearance. And
also what comes to mind is the exercise of holding the world in your hands, of making yourself progressively bigger until the world, is in your hands. And that's something I do twice a day. And so that could be a representation of that, the concept and all the experiences associated with it.
Hercules, you're one of the secret chiefs.
I don't think so. I don't pay dues. I let it lapse. So, but yeah, because it's a great exercise to do, and it gives you a very different, perspective, and psychologically it minimizes all your problems or challenges or anything, because you're here and you're in a position to bless the world or the universe or whatever it happens to be that you're holding in your hand. So that could be for that magician, that thing, the physical object to root that understanding, that experience, that reality into the globe.
That's a great idea. I do, I have on my tablet Hubble images. So every night I look at Hubble, and now James Webb images, and it gives me that same sort of like perspective. There's a very, very, very large universe, and James Webb is seeing more of it, and it's big. It's really big. Yeah.
I wanted to offer one thought about the Paradros and HGA question. I think, certainly in the Greek tradition, the closest analog to the HGA is the guardian daimon, which Plato wrote about, and all of the Platonists wrote about, and there was quite a bit of theory about the nature of the guardian daimon. So in the sense of somebody that's in some sense is above your soul and is giving you guidance and is directing your life and your destiny and directing you even between lives, I think, which would be more the way I would think of the HGA. I think the guardian daimon is probably a closer analog to that. And I mean, Paradros means assistant or helper, and so in that sense, you think you're going to be giving them, or not necessarily orders, but at least asking them to do things for you. And that's a little different, I think, than what you would expect to do with your HGA, I would think. So in that sense, I think they're probably different. So I think we can be in contact with lots of different daimons. And the guardian daimon holds kind of a special role. Apuleius, I think, or maybe it was Plutarch, said that it was always sort of one rank above you, So if you were somebody like Socrates, who was already an embodied daimon, then your guardian spirit was a god. Okay, but for the rest of us, our guardian spirit is a daimon. And so that you've got a special relationship with that particular spirit. But then you could work with lots of other spirits too, which are often in the lineage of some deity, Hermes or Aphrodite or Apollo or whoever, and may even go by the name of that god. That's something else that Plutarch points out, is that you're working with a spirit, and you say, well, who are you? Well, I'm Apollo. Well, okay. But what that really means is you're in the lineage of Apollo and essentially doing Apollo's work in time and
in the
space.
world.
Yeah. And so those I think of as more assistants, that are helping us in different aspects of our life, and that we might call on to do in different magical workings or for different spiritual purposes and so forth, as opposed to our guardian daimon, which is kind of overseeing our whole life and our destiny, true will, whatever, however you want to think of that, is I think that's really the role of the guardian daimon, at least in the Platonic tradition.
Great work. Perfect wisdom and true happiness. Yeah, and I think that that's very clear, Apollonius, and it's a very important point to make, because I think of that in the same way, that the guardian daimon, I think of it as my personal daimon, is like one step above me. And there is a papyrus that's meeting with one's own daimon in the collection. So it's in that it's in the tradition. The Paredros, you're right, is a spirit that you would then give sort of marching orders to. So it's like one down from you. But I think also it might have something of the same character of being that one spirit that you connect with. We connect with lots of daimons, and they became demons and go into the grimoires, and you can ask them for specific things and work with them. But the Paredros is something that you work with, that's just a one-on-one that takes you a long time to build up. So it could, that's why I think you were thinking that the sphere might be that particular kind of spirit. So they are different, but they may be sort of in the same class of like really significant to one person spirits.
I'm reminded of the neo-theosophical graphs. Have you seen them with the I am movement, it's called usually? They have a chart of an individual, and then it's like a cone with different colors. Then there's like another more glowing individual on top of them. And then on top of that, there's another glowing individual. And these are all levels of the self. And for most people, the next step up is the Christ self. So everyone has a Christ self, and the Christ self is able to command angels. So if you want like angels to protect your house, so you would ask your Christ self, your I am, which is I think a level or two above that, to please send angels to protect your car, to protect your house. So that was what I was reminded of when you guys were just speaking about the assistant. And it's all you, it's all different levels of you. And in establishing a communication with these levels of you have access to more options, in terms of how you interact with the world around you.
Yeah, I have been exposed to that for sure. And I one of the things I really love about Theurgy is that it gives me this sort of pagan way to access that whole material. So I have to work with Christ, which I don't have a really good relationship with Christ.
Nor do I.
But Hermes and I are tight.
I actually find it interesting that Tiferet is a sphere where you attain to Christ consciousness, but it's also the sphere where you attain to the knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel. So there does seem to be this connection between the HGA and JC.
You have
just putting it out there.
We everybody show us your Hermes. He's got
the same Hermes.
Yeah. Do you have all of them?
Color.
I have the set.
I'm missing a few of them. I couldn't get them all when they were available.
I bought them as a set. Oh, it's expensive as heck.
I remember when they first came out, it was like, ooh, So they keep me company. That line mostly keeps me company here as I do my podcasts.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I did the year of theurgic practice where I did the Deity of the Month Club. Yeah. And I offered the statues as the Galma to each of the deities. So when I want to connect with them, I connect with them. But then I had to get, it's not in the set, Asclepius and Hygeia. So I got them separately and worked with them separately. And Apollonius, who's he's back.
Yes, Apollonius.
Gave us a wonderful sigil for Hygeia. Hygeia. Yeah. That was really wonderful to work with. Oh, it's which. Oh, you're muted.
You're muted, Apollonius.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, I just thought I'd show you an example of a crude but statue.
Oh, look at that.
So this is straight
really
out
nice.
of the Greek magical papyri. That's polymer resin. So, I mean, I also collect these lovely classical statues as well, which are very, very, very useful as well. but this is the kind you might manufacture, for a specific magical purpose. So anyway, my crude artwork there.
It's too far away in the room, otherwise I'd show you one that I fashioned, but next time.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll do show and tell of our created objects.
The only
Yeah.
time I actually tried to create an object was I had read a bunch of stuff on egregores and homunculi and tulpas, and all that information was floating inside my head. And I was in a very transitional period in my life. It was following a divorce, and I was living in a very small apartment, and the landlords had access to the apartment. So I needed something to guard my stuff, and my cats while I was away. So I found a Chinese lion dog figure at a garage sale. So I took it and I painted it, and purified it in the sun and with salt and all sorts of stuff, to get it clear whatever vibes are there. And I was very into runes at that point. So I picked the runes that I wanted to put into it, and then I shuffled the way the runes were to make it into like something that sounded like a magical name. So finally I was happy with that, and it resonated. So I wrote the name in golden runes on the bottom of the object, and I just kept imagining what I wanted it to do on some astral level, and it worked fairly well. And then there came a time that I was going to move, so I decommissioned it. And I thanked it for its service, and I let it go. I didn't want to dissolve it back into the ethers like some books tell you to do. I figured it can go guard something to its satisfaction. And the next day I came home, and the statue had broken or exploded or something, but it was no longer intact. So that was a dramatic punctuation mark at the end of that particular adventure.
Yeah.
Well, I think what this shows is, there's a whole range and variety of these kinds of objects, and we can empower them and at various levels, and it's partly a matter of how much effort we want to put in for a particular purpose.
So we're running out of time. We have, because I know everybody has to run usually. We have 6 more minutes. And does everybody have to go, or do you want to continue it for another 10 minutes? What would you like to do?
Yeah, I should go at 7. I couldn't. I had to look it up. Shakespeare has that play in which a magician has a spirit. Ariel was the spirit's name, and at the very end of the play, the spirit gets to be released. And I've seen a couple of stagings, and the spirit is always like, "I'm out of here," They're like, "Leap up and go," right? And that was what I was thinking of when you're statues. But yes, thank you for your service. Thanks so much. I'm out of here.
So before going out of here, Whitticle, if you can kindly share your latest project and how people can contact you. We'll start with Brandy.
Okay, I am brandywilliamsauthor.com, Brandy Williams Author on Instagram. I am going to be, I think that the Women in Magic conference is still on for October 1st, but we'll have another, I think, one of these before then. But that's, I'm supposed to be keynote there. So starting about, I have a note September 1st, work on the presentation. That's my next thing to do.
Mine is finish editing my portion of the book that you gave me feedback on. Thank you, Brandy. We'll go down counterclockwise, I guess. Tony, any last thoughts you'd like to leave on this topic, and how can people contact you?
Best way to contact me is probably through Facebook, either my personal page or my author page. There's Pagan Pride Day coming up in Los Angeles and Orange County, and I haven't applied for it yet, but normally I talk there every year. So that's probably going to be my next speaking engagement. Just reminded me I should contact the relevant people and say, hey, do you guys want me back this year?
And let me know if you're speaking. I'll be glad to spread the news through posts. And
We'll do, and thank you so much for that. Much appreciated.
My pleasure. We're a community.
Indeed.
And Apollonius, last but not least, and again, thank you for all your insights today. You've opened my mind. Everybody did, but you especially today, gave me a million things to meditate upon.
Oh, thank you. I've just gave a couple talks, so that's kind of out of the way. I have maybe just another interview coming up. I'll let you know about in the immediate future. I've got a new project. I'm working on the Homer Oracle, and so if any of you have used that, please get in touch with me, and I'd like to get your insights on that. The best way to get a hold of me is through my websites. One is opsopaeus.com. That's OPSOPAUS.com. And the other is wisdomofhypatia.com. Wisdom of Hypatia is all one word, and Hypatia is HYPATIA. I'm on Facebook, but it's generally easier to get a hold of me through email.
Thank you so very much. And I started doing my Cave of the Centaur, or Chiron's Cave. It has names that change all the time. I've been running this in one form or another for decades. So now it started again in Branchville, New Jersey. And once we get past the Olympian shamanism and the heroic path part, I'm going to start focusing on Theurgy. And I already put your books there. So all the books that you have in the websites and our book, when it comes out, are going to be part of the curriculum for that part of it. So I'm really looking forward to that adventure. And I guess next time Jean-Louis is here, we could hear about his community and how that's coming along. Thank you. You're all wonderful, and one of the high points of my existence, because this is an awesome conversation, and we've had it going for years. Thank you very much. And if I could figure out how to exit now from here, we could all be on our way out of here.
End recording.